Let's call this meeting to order. This is our meeting, our Synergy Project Periodic Oversight. Welcome to meeting Zig. Your presentations here. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much.
Let me run around and identify people for the record. Dick Training Assembly.
Elby Green Jackson.
Tim Steele.
Okay. Go ahead, Zig.
Great. Thank you very much. So this is basically the report for this past month. There's some very interesting things that have been going on. What we'll talk about is a little bit about the activity, what's been going on, a little commentary on the progress of the project. I do want to revisit the functional view of the project, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Certainly need to talk about the pause, which is ongoing right now, and a little bit about project governance and some conclusions. So that's what we'll talk about. So the activity, the pause, which most people are aware of, has been established. It was announced last week, and in essence, the contractor's last day is probably going to be tomorrow. We do have the real estate group is actively trying to work out how to get out for the Sunshine lease, Sunshine Building lease, whether it's sublet or whatever the case may be. That they're working on that, and we've got quite a few. I don't know. I shouldn't say quite a few, but there are some apartments out there that have been used by the contractors. That again, the real estate group is shutting those down. I think from a progress perspective, if you look at, well, I'll show you this in just a second, there are approximately 1,250 documents that comprise the blueprint, and in terms of the design activities. And I think the bottom line is about 50% of those documents haven't been touched yet. They're still to be done. Okay, so as of the pause, as of this Friday when the contractors leave, you'll still have 50% of that approximate, round numbers, 1,250 documents to be worked on when you start up again. Time management requirements is a sub-project, and I think it's just a reminder that that's a key dependency to this project and continues to be. And it's something we've talked about for several months now, and it continues to be an important decision. I think the administration certainly recognizes that and is moving forward with that. I refer to as a Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee of leaders around Anchorage have been established. That was what the administration said they would do, and they did it. That group has been established, and so they had their first meeting this week on Monday. Top-level governance, these two major committees that the project has been working with is a functional steering committee and an executive steering committee, and apparently those, for sure, the functional steering committee will continue, which is good news. Okay. The executive steering committee, we still need to get that resolved because that involves the next level of leadership under the mayor, and certainly some transitions and additions going on there. The new CFO is in place, but the CIO that position is still open.
I have a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need some clarification on the committees that you're talking about that are going to continue to exist, because my understanding was that the only committee that was going to exist during the pause is the citizen committee.
Well, the team is of the opinion, at least this is how I understand it, of the opinion that committee should continue, that there are various guidance, various strategic decisions that need to be made. That committee would then be the appropriate committee where that would reside. And I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
This is taken from the weekly report. Now, this happens to be 2 weeks old, so that information that's on here is as of 8/19. But it's very reflective of what's going to be in place and what the conditions will be as of tomorrow. So I think the key thing we wanted you to see there is, and that's the purpose for the red arrows and the green arrows. I mean, the green arrows are the things that have been sent out for approval. That's the stuff that everybody's trying to wrap up. Okay, the red arrows are the things that have not been started at all. So when I say that you're about 50% complete, if you look over to the right-hand side on not started as far as HCM is concerned, you'll see 56.7% have not been started. And then as far as Philo is concerned, 49% have not been started. So combine those two and you're approximately 50%. If they have not been started and the approach of the team is to finish what has been started, then those are going to remain not started as of tomorrow. And that's the 50% calculation. Now I've got some arrows in there and just basically trying to say that every effort that the contractors, the team, if you will, has been working on for the last 2 weeks, every effort is being made to, in essence, take them out of those statuses and basically get the documents approved. Okay, so there will be a change in that count, probably in the report as of this week, which I don't have. I wanted to also, let you know what kind of information is there. If you look at the column that says HCM and Philo, right next to the column that has the letters WRICEF, they're slightly different in terms of the documents. The documents that are in the left-hand column are mainly the ones that are solved with configuration of the software. Mainly. The ones with all the letters.
Question for you.
Sure.
What does WRICEF mean?
Bottom of the page, sir.
Workflow reports.
Should be there. WRIC. It's right up here on the screen.
Yeah, we see it.
It means workflow. W means workflow. R means reports. I is interfaces. C is conversions. E is enhancements. And F is forms. The reason that I wanted you to kind of see what that is that represents development work. So folks, when you start the realization, you start the programming, you start the development sometime in 2016, okay, that's the work that they'll be working on. But this is the documentation, this is the design that's going to be telling those developers what to be doing, and that's just a category of all the things that they'll be working on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about early successes. If you recall, way back when, we had a presentation and we talked about it would be wonderful if your team could generate some early successes. And I think we coined the phrase or used the phrase, gee, it would be nice if there were chunks that could be completed and we could get some early successes. And what we did here in that chart, and this is basically a repeat of the chart from February of 2015. That's what this chart is. Came right out of the report, and we had identified 5 modules out of the 19 modules. Basically said, well, the SAP QA report said these were low risk because they were pretty close to being finished, okay, and it wouldn't take a lot of work to finish them. So that's basically what drove us to the conclusion that those 5 would be excellent candidates for some kind of early success. That was in February. Excuse me. So in March, the team examined and looked at all this stuff, looked at the SAP report and said, we really could probably turn those 5 modules into a status of go live ready. Doesn't go live, you're not in production yet, but they'd be ready. So it would be an indication of an early success. And they basically indicated that could possibly be done by May of 2015. In April of 2015, the executive sponsor, project sponsor for the project was in an ESC, Executive Steering Committee and Functional Steering Committee meeting, and said, no, that's not going to happen. These things are going to go live, or we're going to target them for April of 2016. So that was just a change. So all I'm saying is today, given the fact that we're in a pause, we really don't have a target for those early successes. So it's just undetermined. So we just need to be aware, but I would suggest to you that those targets for an early success remain. There's nothing has changed the fact that those are pretty close to being finished. Nothing's changed. They're better documented, okay? Blueprint is definitely completing the documentation associated with those. But in terms of configuration, and I think the message here is that there are things in the system that have been configured that are pretty close to being going forward. So it's not a matter of you saying you've spent a lot of money and got nothing. Okay? So I wanted to kind of remind everybody on a functional view of the system. This is a chart that was presented to you in March of 2015. And we basically, instead of looking at the project using the terminology that the project team had been using, which is all about preparation, blueprint, realization, those kinds of terms, how about, well, what is it we're trying to accomplish from a functional perspective? And in essence, you need to realize, and that was the message here, is that we have a financial component to this whole thing, and we have a human resources component. The terms are Philo and HCM. So we presented this to you kind of so you could see that, in essence, everybody was in general agreement, and I'm talking about the team now, that you would certainly be implementing finance and HR concurrently, okay? But that finance is much further along, much closer to being finished, would probably finish sooner than HR. So that's why it's shown that way. The other thing that we discussed at that time was that, when finance completes a little earlier than HR, we can go ahead and do budget prep. That is a module that you purchased from SAP. Then it made sense. You could fit that in. Your financial people could roll right into the budget prep piece. So that was in March. At that time, we already knew that there were some approaches that everybody wanted to decide on and take into consideration, which was the issue of Kronos, as well as the software infrastructure and the upgrade of the software. That was already there in March. August of 2015, today, we now know we have the pause, okay? And in essence, when the pause occurred, that's the black box. In essence, we have now split the blueprint in half. Some is done, some is still to do. Okay? The other thing that does is it says, well, you're starting to now move those functional implementations out further, and this whole issue of trying to decide about Kronos is moving out with it. Okay, so that's fundamentally the pause effect. The other thing that has happened is that the team has come to the conclusion that we don't want to include budget prep in the scope of the project. It is a way of keeping costs down. No argument there. So I'm just basically saying, okay, let's all understand and realize that there's an X there. Not going to do budget prep. All right? In August of 2015, now we've basically said that scope is being reduced.
Elby has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you saying that the team decided not to have budget prep as part of the SAP implementation and keep team budget instead?
As part of the budget and the target completions that they're going to try to be generating, assuming that you go forward with SAP, they're going to have to answer your question, which is going to be, when is it going to be done and what's it going to cost?
Well, my question is, okay, what I thought I heard you say was that the budget prep part of the implementation, or just SAP period, is not going to happen. They're going to keep team budget, what they have in place now, instead.
It's not, right?
Is that correct?
The leadership of the project came to a conclusion I don't know exactly at what point in time, that would not be in scope, because that was a way of reducing the time needs, schedule needs, and budget needs. I don't think anybody's saying you don't ever do it. I don't think that's the case at all. But it is being viewed as a potential follow-on project with a separate budget, separate situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted clarification.
Okay.
Thank you very
But
much.
Zig, we already bought this, didn't we?
Oh yeah, you own it. You own the SAP budget prep module. Absolutely you do.
But we're just not going to drive it.
I'm sorry?
We're not going to drive it down the street even though we own it. Thank you, Zig.
Okay.
Hold it, by the way. Come up here. sit down here. You're an important part of this, sir.
I see that.
Welcome to the meeting, Alden. Zig, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, the other thing that happened, over time, and from a functional perspective, is several of these decisions that everybody knew about in March, have continually been kind of deferred and pushed back. And that's kind of what we're trying to show there, that we still basically have not resolved the question of how do we handle time management, time evaluation, et cetera, which coined as being Chronos. And we also haven't resolved, I think that the resolution, if you go forward with SAP, has been resolved with regard to upgrade. I think everybody agrees going to do the upgrade. But the infrastructure question of where it runs and so forth, that still remains open. But obviously those are tied to, do we continue on with SAP? So let's talk a little bit about the pause, just describing the pause. The Blue Ribbon Committee, my understanding, and I think I've got this correct, there are 7 members, 5 are very technology-oriented, and 2 are very finance-oriented. The target for the pause, based on the meeting that happened Monday, is 4 to 6 weeks. So there's a lot of pressure on the committee to move forward and move forward quickly. They are supposed to meet weekly. They have limited staff support. I mean, the number of people that are dedicated to providing continual activity associated with this is 3. So there's some limited support as far as they're concerned, as far as that activity is concerned. So their assignment, this is a restatement from Monday, is, do we continue with SAP? Or do something else? And that's their assignment. Okay. Now, start over. We've got to remember that requires all kinds of things in terms of an RFP process, and we've got to absorb some work in process cost. But some of the choices might be that we re-implement PeopleSoft. Maybe we even look at a completely different solution. So there's a variety of sub issues there. If you say let's start over. Okay.
Zig, let me hold you up for a second. Alden, do you agree with all of his assumptions on this page?
I certainly
Not to
have
put
7.
you on point, but I just want to know if you
okay.
agree.
That's all right. Well, I'm heading the group. We certainly have 7 very active and very good members, by the way. So I think you're going to be very happy with the group. I referred to them that based upon our last meeting, that the goal of the assembly was if they could finish up by the end of September, that would be a target. When they had me done talking for 3 hours and this much paperwork plus this much more to read, they were a little daunted by the task. But whether they can make it, they'll certainly do their best. But they might go a little bit longer, depending upon how good a job they want to do. We are meeting weekly. The next meeting has already been scheduled for next week, and that is that was the mission statement that was written to kind of give them some direction that we were looking for. And we also, as a result of this, wanted them to do some kind of a briefing for the mayor to be able to say, based upon our research, our review of this is what we recommend.
Thank you. Tim?
My concern is what's going to be usable and what's going to be lost in this process.
You talk about the pause?
In terms of the pause.
And we talked about this last time.
And as it gets longer, I presume there's more risk.
Absolutely. The longer the pause goes, I mean, certainly there's several impacts. One of them is going to be that the overall project duration is going to stretch. It's going to stretch. But it's going to stretch more than just the length of the pause. If the pause is 4 weeks, that doesn't necessarily mean that you add 4 weeks at the end. Because the next problem is you're going to have problems ramping back up again. Now, the tighter you make it, the closer to that 4 weeks, the easier it is for you to ramp back up and bring some folks back. But if it gets to be 8 weeks, it becomes extremely difficult now to bring back some of that corporate knowledge that you have lost by saying, okay, folks, we got to let you go.
Plus what you've already blueprinted is...
Yeah, now you got the blueprint reached out. So remember I said earlier that the blueprint was 50, round numbers, 50%. Okay? So that means you've still got work left to do to finish the blueprint. Okay? The bulk of what's been done in the blueprint is basically documenting what was done before. In other words, it's the as-built. It's finishing all that documentation, making sure it's complete and accurate and so forth. the to-be new stuff hasn't really been looked at yet. Okay, so that's something that has to be done, and then now we're back to, if I'm going to have someone working on this, I got to get them ready to go. I got to ramp up, and if it's not the same people, then I'm going to have to go through a learning curve and so on. If I go to a different solution, whether it's PeopleSoft or another solution, you can probably reuse some of that blueprint, but certainly not all the SAP specific stuff that's in there.
Alden?
And I agree with the staffing, and that's going to be one of the things we're most concerned about. But to try to mitigate what's going on as far as the timeline here, we had several other decisions that had to be made that hadn't been started and so forth. So we're actually taking this pause while we're doing the committee work, but we're also moving forward on some of these very critical areas: time management, reporting requirements, data migration. These are big, huge issues that absolutely, Tim. And so I want you to realize that while we're taking this pause and the blueprinting stop, major components that were going to be impacting the future blueprinting are taking place. My goal is to have those all hit at the same time so that when the blueprinting gets going again, we've already got these major things so that they're not waiting for those answers going forward, which would have just extended the blueprint phase even longer. So absolutely, it's going to be hard. It'll take some time to get back on, but we are not just meeting with the committee and doing nothing. There are major initiatives that are going on that absolutely.
There is a cost of time. I mean, there's loss during time, so time is of the essence.
That is correct, and as a result of that, I didn't want to wait until we figured out where we were going to start those, so we're taking this exact time, as well as there's some infrastructure looking at and cleaning that up as well. So we've got several things going on in addition to this committee meeting that all had to take place.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in other words, that's why the executive committee and the steering committee are still in place. Thank you.
As well as communication, because we don't want to have a communication vacuum. We want to be open, honest, get the employees out there, so it's an avenue to be able to communicate.
Are you still going to be working on the hardware requirements? Because hardware is going to be needed no matter what system we use.
We're certainly looking at some of the hardware and where certain things are residing on the servers right now and cleaning up some things and looking at all of that. A part of the decision, part of the things that are going on this time of where are we going to host it later on and everything. We have about 9 different decisions that we're making, 3 avenues. Want answers to all of those roughly at the same time that the committee gets finished. So you'll have literally every answer we need, and when we come back, we can just hit it.
Go ahead, Zach.
So,
sorry to interrupt you.
As Alden suggested, I mean, we understand and we know what those options are, and the committee is going to have to come up with what their recommendation is. But there's a fairly major decision criteria that we think that committee needs to be taking into consideration. They need to be paying attention to this. Okay, and Alden and I already talked about this. I mean, I'm sure he's going to make sure that the committee on Tuesday understands this. But if you recall, we basically, when we going back up, you'll see at the bottom we said that the choices are you continue with SAP, okay, or you do something else. You start over. Well, if you start over, you have to recognize that you now have a significant amount of money that has, in essence, been placed in work in process. Okay, it's been placed in work in process. As soon as you come to the determination that that's not an asset anymore, that I'm stopping that, it's not the asset that I thought I was going to do, and I had invested all this money in that potential asset, I now need to write that down. From an accounting perspective, I got to basically take it out of work in process, and as soon as I do that, I got to put it into operating expenses. Okay, now. Is it all of the money? Probably not. Okay, it's not the whole sum total. But that's why I'm saying you got to confirm all this with your independent auditor. You're going to have to sit there and resolve exactly how much of that you're going to have to really absorb and take on that the taxpayers would end up having to pay. It's not all. It's a portion, whatever that may be. But you've already spent monies on things. And for instance, you've already bought hardware. There's some hardware money in there. I mean, that's an asset. You're okay there. You can depreciate that, and you don't have to treat it as an operating expense. But the contractor services payments, that's the one that's you got to look at.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is to Alden, if I may. We already received our independent auditors, also known as BDO's opinion on this. Have you seen it?
I have not seen that specific document.
Okay, because the administration has a copy of it, and so you may want to talk to Suzanne. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay?
Good, Zig, sorry.
Yeah, and Alden has already alluded to this. I mean, there are some, the administration recognizes that we got to make some decisions. We got to keep moving. And so, I've tried to let you see that some of these things have been sitting around for quite a while. Okay, so we really need to get going, and I think the administration understands that. I think we've been told, and we have discussed the fact that this whole time management thing is a dependent activity, and it's one that the SAP folks have been needed to get resolved. They can't finish the blueprint until they know whether or not they got to do time management. Okay, so the work rules and all that kind of thing. So that's hanging out there. It needs to get resolved. What needs to get resolved is this whole issue of data conversion, migration strategy. All that needs to get done, and it doesn't matter what the solution is. It doesn't matter if it's something other than SAP. It still needs to get done, and especially, I've harped on this I don't know how many times, that granularity of the inception to date data. I mean, I've got a document from February of 2015 that said we've decided what we're going to do. Yet still we are here today and we still can't resolve, are we or are we not going to move over the detailed data for all the contract and project cost to date information, and we're going to move it over. It's still hanging out there.
Well, Zig, I've got a document home to show a go-live date months and years ago, so I'll trade my documents for yours.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, the third one, and you already talked about this one. The organization's got to come to grips with what are you going to do with the legacy hardware, the infrastructure. You just got to come to grips with that and resolve that. Say, hey, either I'm going to replace it or I'm not, or either I'm going to go outside or I'm not. I mean, and again, doesn't matter if it's SAP, because we all know we've got to have a new ERP. It's got to replace the existing system in the story. And then lastly, this is one that I'd like to continue to bring up, and because you're at a moment in time now where you can address, do I or don't I want to have a systems integrator for going forward, or do I want to continue to be the general contractor? Okay. And that's why I said last month, a good time to make that happen is when you finish blueprint. And if you don't finish blueprint and it's for another solution, you call it design. I mean, it's okay. But that makes the best point in time to do it, because anybody that's going to quote you for a systems integration work is going to say, I'm willing to do it if I've got a design in place. If I've got that document in place, then they're going to be much more willing to give you a quote. So and I think we've talked about the fact that you definitely want to continue to have these the committees operating. I mean, the functional steering committee really needs to be paying attention to the various issues and concerns that you're going to have coming up over the next 4 weeks. It's going to happen, and certainly this whole time reporting thing, the data conversion, infrastructure, collaboration with the Blue Ribbon Committee, and then certainly you would want to make sure that the Blue Ribbon Committee comes up with a recommendation, and you would hopefully have the functional steering committee saying, yep, we agree. That's what ought to go to the administration. Okay? And this is an opportunity also to get some contracting consistency. And we've had plenty of discussions about that, and I've talked plenty of times with Ron about this too. Okay? So conclusions, administration recognizes the need to make some of these difficult decisions. So I think they understand that. I think it's good. Let's just take action. We need to recognize that the pause, if we're not careful, you can do it quickly and you're okay, but if it starts spreading beyond 4 weeks, it will create a delay in project go live. I think it will likely the pause will increase the overall project cost due to your ramp up time. Okay, we do think that your systems integrator approach won't occur until after the blueprint. But you need to recognize that if you go down that road, you're going to expose yourself to some significant contingency fees. I've talked with those, with the two most likely systems integrators, and if you continue on with SAP, they're going to want some extra money. You know, so you need to recognize that. And that may be a reason for saying I'll continue being the general contractor. If you treat budget prep as a separate follow-on project, it will stretch your overall delivery time. And if you treat it as a separate project, you're probably going to find yourself with some additional cost as well. So on that note, here's my question slide.
Question from assembly members. Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question for Zig, but I have a question for Alden, if I may. On the conclusions, the third one down, and then the last one, what's your opinion of them? Do you agree?
The pause will likely create an increase in projected cost due to ramp-up time. I do believe that it has the potential of extending the blueprinting time period because of that. I absolutely believe that, you know, we're not going to get every contractor back and that's currently there because they're going to go find other work, and it's going to take some time to be able to do that. We've been able to try to maintain some of these other things that I mentioned that we're going to take time downstream anyway, so I'm trying to mitigate that, but the potential is certainly there at that point. And which other one?
The last one, budget
The
prep.
budget prep. The decision is one of the decisions we need to make, but at this point in time, I would probably lean with what has been stated that we need to get HCM and Philo going. And the budget prep is certainly a module that we've purchased. We will have, that'll be, it's always been determined to be the second phase. Plus you have to have some live data from the Philo to feed into it anyway. So we have a couple of choices we could make. As soon as blueprinting gets started, is completed with Philo and HCM, we could start blueprinting the other one. But in reality is we probably want to try to focus our efforts on getting the system up and running, and then what I've been told is that we could work on the budgeting module at that point. So at this point, I want to focus on trying to get the system up, and the budgeting will be the second phase.
Right, can I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Good.
Thank you. But isn't that the way it would be anyway? I mean, like you just said, you need these other parts.
That's the way it's
before you
always
do the
been.
budget.
That's the way it's always been
Budget prep.
planned.
So
Yes.
it's really not a pause, it's just when you get to it.
And we could certainly do it, but it's going to, with everything else, but it's going to hold up the entire process
Right.
of the other modules, and we still have to wait to feed information into it once we went live.
Right, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Steele?
I'm happy. Well,
Alden, questions?
content.
I would just hope that the assembly would see that we may be taking a pause, but we are far from stopping all of these major.
You're far from pausing, huh?
We are many of these avenues, and as you're well aware, I mean, we're working on, and we are not going to stop. And there's a lot of work that's going to be done that had to be done anyway, and it's better to have that done now, so that when we get back to the pause being gone, we're ready to take some major action and move forward in a very aggressive manner. As you've mentioned, many of these decisions have been out there for years and haven't been made. And I'm hoping that all these decisions will be made here at the end of, sometime in October, depending on the committee and everything, that we will have a good sound project on every single one of those, and we can really focus our efforts and move forward.
Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really think that folks need to understand what the pause means, okay? Because myself, I had no idea that everything else was continuing. I mean, I think it's a good thing, but I thought a pause meant a pause while this.
I've been working on that.
Yeah, like the new committee, the committee, would figure it out, and then everything else would continue. And I think if I thought that, there's a lot of my colleagues probably have the same understanding that I had. Not just my colleagues, but the public too. So I think people need to understand exactly what's going on.
We have CFO has scheduled a meeting with the staff that have been working on this for tomorrow. We'll keep them updated at that point. I will say that I want everybody to realize that I think, which is important, that some of these avenues are being actually done by SAP and Peloton with no charge to the administration.
Good.
So we're continuing the work, and that's how we're able to accomplish this, because we are not spending any money on blueprinting or SAP going forward, yet they have come forward and are committed resources to make these other things happen through September, for at least at this point in time. And I think that shows a commitment to our process that we're attempting to get these things done. I would not be able to move those forward without those personnel commitments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing else? Thank you, Zig.
Thank you, Zig.
You're welcome.
This meeting's over with. Thanks for being here.